Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to New York's Mrs. Podcast. My name is Jacob Restituto, and I run and manage Restituto Media, a photography, videography company here on Long Island. And today, I'm joined with Ryan here at Route 27 Hemp Yard. I really appreciate you taking the time, Ryan. Thank you so much. Looking forward to this conversation. So, for those that aren't familiar with you, can you give a little bit of extra on who you are, introduce yourself, and tell your story?
Yeah. How you doing, everybody? My name is Ryan Andoos. I am the co-owner of Route 27 Hemp Yard. My uncle, Mark Carroll, is the other owner with me. And born and raised in Oceanside, New York, which is about an hour east of here on Long Island. Started this just going on about 10 years ago. And it was definitely a journey. It did not, I didn't want to grow up to be specifically in the cannabis industry or hemp industry. I just love hort and agriculture. So that's my whole life since I was 3 years old. So it was an interesting journey to get me here, though, for sure.
So that's really interesting. So, from the people that I've talked to in these podcasts and stuff, it's interesting. We kind of have the two schools of camp. One is like, I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew that I was meant to be a part of a certain industry. And others are like, yeah, it kind of fell into my lap. I just never really expected to be where I am.
Yeah. It's a hybrid because I always wanted hort and agriculture, but not specifically cannabis. Like it wasn't like I want to do cannabis.
So talk to me. How do you go from wanting to be in horticulture to now being in the cannabis industry? And tell me before you even get into that. Tell me about the farm and how big the property is and what you guys do here, and tell me a little bit more.
Yeah. So this is 13 acres. The farm. The prior owner bought it when it was virgin woods. He cleared it back in the late 50s and cleared the whole thing. This whole area was nursery stock for like trees and shrubs for landscapers, and then also duck for meat. So that was like all the farming in this general area was geared towards that. And then it was an Italian immigrant who actually came over, cleared it, did all this, and the former owner, his son is actually the one that I met, and then I'll get into that story later on. But then we acquired it, and he had actually let the nursery stock go abandoned. So it was for almost like 8 to 10 years. It was abandoned. So like all the nursery stock grew into even something thicker or denser than even woods. You could barely walk through it because it was all supposed to be harvested, right? So we came out here in late 15, early 16, and started clearing it and grew it into what it is today.
That's wild. So how is it structured now? I know you guys have greenhouses, and then I know you have, 13 acres is a ton of space. So what are you doing on 13 acres?
Yeah, so right now we're doing hemp outdoor, and we're also doing cannabis outdoor. And then we also have greenhouses where we do cannabis production as well. On the property. So, and then we also rotate. We crop rotate.
Very cool. Every year, every 7 years? Or?
Every year, and we do cover crops as well.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah.
So your industry comes with a lot of misconceptions or questions.
A lot.
And I'd be really curious if you can just talk to a couple of the misconceptions or questions in your industry that you think people that aren't super familiar with the industry, that might judge your industry, might judge you, break some of those down. I might have specific questions, but I'm curious in your more your FAQs essentially.
Yeah, I mean, so hemp and cannabis, yes, they are extremely similar, but there is so many differences. So, when someone says hemp, they automatically think cannabis, right? They think something that's going to be intoxicating like THC. So THC is what makes cannabis, okay? But you have all these minor cannabinoids. So the 2018 Farm Bill that got passed is what legalized the hemp industry in the United States of America. The hemp industry was massive in the United States of America, and it's actually very large across the whole globe, specifically for hemp that's used for rope, for clothing, for insulation, so on and so forth. They call that industrial hemp, right? And that's something that up until reefer, the whole reefer madness thing came in the 30s, right after Prohibition, and it was the whole reefer madness that was somewhat political because there was certain industries who had manila rope plantations down in the Caribbean, and hemp basically competed with that, right? So they kind of took hemp and grouped it in with cannabis, right? And the intoxicating effects, not all the positive effects of hemp. Mm-hmm. And that's what outlawed. Now World War II comes, and we need more cloth, rope, etc. Now it comes back again. Now by 1944, 45, there was almost 250,000 acres of hemp in the United States of America. Right after the war effort, gone again. It wasn't until 2018 where it actually became legalized again. And that's just all the industrial side, right? Then you have the food. So you have your hemp hearts, super high in protein, very healthy for you. Great food source. And then you have CBD. Now CBD, there's so many other minor cannabinoids, CBD being the most popular. You have CBG, you have CBDV, you have CBN, and all these minor cannabinoids do something different. So we can't make claims because the FDA still has not released their guidelines on this stuff. And that's the big crux in the hemp industry, is that there's no federal guidelines. Each state makes up their guidelines. Yeah, so that's why you don't see big Fortune 500 companies like Gatorade putting CBD in, because each state's different, right? So the Fed and this new farm bill that's supposed to be coming out in 2025, supposed to come out in 24, but that didn't happen. We're hoping that those guidelines are met and that the USDA and FDA make those guidelines, so that way it can be more mainstream. Now, they've done studies with hemp. There's one FDA-approved drug called Epidiolex, and that is to reduce seizures. And it's on the market and it works phenomenal. Then you have other minor cannabinoids, right? CBG, antimicrobial. CBN helps you sleep. CBDV lowers your blood pressure. And they don't have any intoxicating effects. The only side effects they may have, if you're on heart medication, it will affect heart medication and it will enhance opiates. Those are the only side effects of CBD. But other than that, you can drive, you can operate machinery. They've done studies on it. It's really great what those minor cannabinoids can do. But then again, big pharma doesn't want that to come out, because rather go on a pill than do something natural and good for your body, right? So there's a huge misconception with hemp and THC. Everyone just assumes hemp is intoxicating. It's not. And in order for hemp to be federally legal in all 50 states, it has to be below 0.3 total THC. Now that's going to get changed probably to 1% total THC, only because it's very difficult for the grower to get below that 0.3. So if something hits 0.4 total THC, it now becomes illegal and you have to burn it.
Wow.
And for the grower, and depending on the season, depending on environmental stresses, how they grow it, you can lose a whole crop, which is a huge problem. 1% is a good, and at 1% total, it's still not going to be intoxicating. And there's ways, if you want THC-free products, there's ways when they manufacture into gummies, into tinctures, stuff like that, they can take that THC out. So
it's fascinating, man, because the way that our society, and I don't know if you want to go into like the news cycles and the media and all of it works, is there's so much information or misinformation or confused information that it's hard to even understand what's true anymore, And to be honest with you, it's probably always been like this. Human nature is flawed, and we as humans aren't the best at always doing the right thing. So like back when Caesar was running the world, right? Yeah. He probably had his own agenda, and he was telling people his own, but there was only one news source, and it was Caesar. Yes. Right now, in this modern world we live in, we have all these access to all of these other news sources. So now we have access to all this information, and we're realizing some things are real and some things are fake, and there's false news and real news and fake news. And at this point, it's just so much information I don't even know what's true anymore. And that's also what's interesting too, is like we're coming. I think now as a society, we're realizing, oh my gosh, all these things that we thought were true are not necessarily true anymore, because it was an agenda, whether it be big pharma or some political or a lobbyist
or big ag even.
Pushing a certain agenda. And then you're like, oh, that's actually not true at all. And now you don't know what to believe.
So you got to see where you got to look at the statistics, but you also have to see where the statistics, who funded that study, right? So whoever provided the funding,
get into some serious conversations
for that study is how the study is going to go.
Yes.
But if you just follow, you just got to follow the breadcrumbs at the end of the day. And that is the major thing, and that is why I think they don't want, and we'll get into the cannabis conversation in a minute, but as far as the hemp conversation goes, that's why I don't think the federal government, they legalized in 2018, and it's going to be 2025 here in a few weeks, and there's still nothing being done. It's because it's going to hurt big pharma. Now, I'm hoping with the new administration, I think there will be some changes, because there is people in the new administration that don't want big pharma involved, and that want to go the more homeopathic route, right? So I think if we'll get passed, and we'll be able to do at least have solid foundation for hemp in all 50 states. Now, as far as cannabis goes, I do not seeing that become federally legal anytime soon. I don't think there's a support behind it. It took them this long to get hemp right?
Yeah.
With cannabis, it's tax revenue alone. That's what they're going to go after, is the tax dollars.
Sure.
And not only that, the U.S., I don't think they're ready for it. I don't think they're going to get the support you need in order to pass that.
So talk to me about that. Now let's talk about cannabis, because and then I want to circle back to it because we got a little sidetracked from like how you got into this industry. But I want to talk about cannabis really quickly, because it, like you said, is really interesting. So many people, including myself for a while, and I've had conversations. I had a separate podcast in the past, and I had a hemp farmer on. And he was trying to explain the whole thing to me too. But there's just so much information that it's like a lot of it was over my head at the time. You did a great job at explaining it, so I commend you for that.
Thank you.
But even that though, like, you talk to the average person on the street, including me, to be honest with you, before our conversation, and you talk about hemp and CBD hemp and cannabis, they wouldn't really be able to tell the difference.
No, they don't.
And I knew, just because I'm in agriculture myself, for my own farm side businesses, I knew that hemp was used for rope or for clothing, but like most people have no clue that that's the case.
Yeah.
That they're like, or paper, it was used for paper for, so like.
And super sustainable, by the way.
Yeah.
Much more sustainable than, cutting down forests and replanting them.
But like it's also, that kind of goes to the point of like this, I don't know if you call it misinformation or just shifted information or.
Well, it's because, as I said, since World War II, we were told it was bad, right? The rest of the world wasn't told that, but we were told that it was the narrative. And then the narrative changed. And honestly, what changed the narrative, to be completely honest with you, was big tobacco went out, right? And people stopped smoking as much cigarettes. And Kentucky was one of the largest tobacco producing states in the nation. And Mitch McConnell, who was the head of the Senate at the time, needed something to replace that was similar, that could be dried in those big tobacco houses, that could be farmed like that. And he was the one who actually pushed the hemp bill for his constituents.
Wow. When was that?
That was back, 2018 they legalized, but he started lobbying for it in 16, 17.
Very,
so
very.
It's actually Mitch McConnell's the reason why it's legal, which you wouldn't think, because the Republicans aren't for that, but it shifted, tremendously.
That's really interesting, and we just briefly touched on something to me that I've been thinking about a lot lately. We're going to sidetrack for a quick second.
Sure.
Because we're talking about this, I have this hypothetical theory that just doesn't make sense to me. I'm curious your opinion, because we're kind of talking about this.
Yeah.
That the tobacco leaf itself is not necessarily bad for you. I'm curious your opinion, because if you look at history, and I've been talking to a lot of people about this, because I grew tobacco actually this year.
Did you?
On my property.
I've always wanted to grow it.
It was easier than I thought, and it produced. I grew like 60 plants.
Okay.
It was way too much, and it was crazy.
Wow, that's a lot of plants.
It was a lot of plants, way more than I needed. In fact, it was sad to see a lot of it go, because I didn't have space to just harvest it and like store it. Like you have to dry it. Like I ran out of space, and it was like. And then the frost came, and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And we get totally sidetracked. But part of me is like, it doesn't. People have smoked forever, and then all of a sudden now it just seems to me. Now you look at cigarettes. Like I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. I'm a cigar guy and stuff, but
Same.
I don't think I ever would smoke a cigarette, with knowing all the crazy things that they put into it.
Yes.
But then you just take a homegrown tobacco leaf, and I'm like, I have a really hard time when the people used to chain smoke like crazy, but none of them seem to die.
So here's the thing, right? So like, inhalating any smoke, right, is not going to be great for your lungs. We'll go down to that. But as far as your theory on that, I do agree with you, because if you look at a country like France, right, they smoke. I lived in France. I worked in France for a summer, and they chain smoke like I've never seen before, and they drink wine like I've never seen before, right? And they have one of the longest life expectancies.
That's really interesting. I see.
So yes, does the smoking and drinking hurt? Yes, but does it de-stress you? And what kills you? Stress.
It's just so interesting.
So it takes, yes, is it bad? But at the same time, it takes away other things. And there's a reason why people in France live so long.
Yeah, see, I don't know. All right, thank you for my
so I tend to agree.
Let's go back to cannabis now. So now you're growing cannabis here too.
So we're growing hemp, and then so I'll tell you a little bit of background about the business. So went to college for horticulture, have a bachelor's degree and associate's degree from SUNY Cobleskill, and came back, worked in Giverny, France at Claude Monet's estate, Monet Gardens, the painter.
Wow, yeah.
And then I also worked in Norway, and I worked in New Zealand in the hop industry.
Wow.
So
What haven't you done?
Yeah, been around the block a little. Once you get a farm, though, you can't travel as much.
Yeah.
Let everybody know. This is all pre-farm. And so after I did all that, graduated college, did a little landscaping on the side, and, actually came back from France, picked up a job at a local florist. Wasn't sure, which direction I want to grow the landscape company. Do I want to do something else? Just something in the middle. And was there, and the guy who owned the building would just come collect the rent check. And the guy's name was Bob. And we got to talking one day. He said, "Yeah, I got 13 acres out in Mauritius." I said, "Oh, tell me about it." "Well, my dad started it, nursery, we're in landscaping, yada yada." I said, "Oh, well, maybe I go see it one day." He goes, "Yeah, well, I'll take you out there." A few months goes by, he brings me out here, I see it. I said, "Bob, what are you doing?" He goes, "Oh, it's very sentimental. I grew up here. My dad immigrated over from Italy. I grew up on this property. I spent my whole childhood, my teenage years. We built this." And he goes, "I can't. My dad passed away. The landscaping, woed down. The business I don't want as big. I'm getting older. I want to retire in a few years." I said, "Oh, Bob, you can't just let this property sit."
Yeah.
He goes, "I can't get rid of it." I said, "All right, well, listen, I want to grow hops. Can I grow hops on it?" And hops are for the beer industry. Hops, barley, wheat, and water, and yeast, obviously. And
did you want to grow hops for beer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So he goes, "All right." He goes, "All right, you can use the property." I said, "Well, what about, the equipment?" And he goes, "Just take care of the equipment, use the property." I said, "All right, well, I got to pay you something for it." And he goes, "You got to clear it." He goes, "I don't think you realize how much work that is." I said, "How bad could it be?" He goes, he laughs. He goes, No, you'll see." I said, "All right, Bob." So make a long story short, my uncle who lived on the block from me, Mark, who I now own the business with, he was actually handing off his construction business to his son, and he can't sit still. He still can't sit still. He's 68 years old, and I said, "Uncle Mark, come on, let's go out here. We'll clear the property.
Just the two of you.
Yeah, let's go. Come on." He goes, all right, fine. So we came out here and we just started clearing. So we cleared 2 acres. It took us 3 years to clear it. So we cleared 2 acres the first year.
With machinery,
we had a backhoe, a 1998 Caterpillar backhoe, and we bought on a military surplus, a deuce and a half 5-ton dumper. And that was actually built in 90. I think it was in Desert Storm, actually. So we cleared it with those 2 pieces of equipment.
And blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, blood, sweat, and tears. That's it. And then we put up our first few acres of hops. We started growing it. I actually flew over to Poland and Germany to get the specialized equipment in order to pick the hops and dry them and everything. And we were doing that, and it took us 3 years to clear all 13 acres. A lot of time, a lot of work. And I was managing a restaurant on the weekends just to make ends meet. So I'd come out here 5 days a week. It was an hour drive each way, and then go on the weekends, work 25 hours on the weekends, come back during the week. And I knew if I wanted to start something like this, I had to be young and I had to have a lot of energy, because once I get married and have kids, it's not going to be there anymore.
It's so true. It's crazy.
So I said, what? I'm 24 at the time, and I said, let's put it this way: if I fail, I can pick myself back up, right? I'll be 28, 29, pick myself back up. It's not the end of the world. So I told my now wife, I said, "Listen, there's another woman in the relationship." And she kind of looked at me. I said, "It's a farm. It's going to take up just as much time as our relationship." So I said, "Either you're in or you're out." And she goes, "I'm in." I said, "Okay." So we started growing hops. We started selling to the beer industry. We had that third year, we had just finished clearing the last 5 acres. And my uncle had a close friend upstate who was in construction, who started growing hemp. So it got legalized in 2018, and he was one of the first people in New York and one of the first people on the East Coast to grow it. And he goes, "Ryan, I'm a bricklayer." He goes, "If I can grow this," he goes, "you have 2 degrees." He goes, "You could grow this." And it was something to differentiate, and the hop industry was going well, but wasn't where I wanted it to be. So he says, "Why don't you give it a try?" He goes, "You just cleared those 5 acres, try out hemp." I said, "Okay." So 2019 rolls around, we plant our first crop. That was also the same year the market started to tank. So we said, we have to start our own brand, which is Route 27 Hemp Yard, our DBA. And that's when we started. As
opposed to what, though? Like, what were you doing beforehand?
So we're still doing the hops. We still continue with the hops.
But why, when the market tanked, did you have to start your own brand? Like, what is it like?
Okay. So basically, we were going to do the wholesale market. And the wholesale, since numbers started tanking, you said direct to consumer, much better margins,
Okay.
right?
Sure.
To help the business.
Oh, wow, cool.
So started doing that. New York State just changed regulations. Like at one point, I felt like it was weekly. I mean, it was probably monthly. So you could not keep up with the new regulations in New York. And as I said, each state has different regulations, and New York just didn't. It was difficult. Let's put it that way. So I became part of, actually, a good friend of mine, Dave, over at Open Minded Organics. He's about 45 minutes east of here. He also grows hemp as well and cannabis now, and he has an organic vegetable farm. He was like, "Hey, Ryan, you got to join this organization to help the small farmers like us in order to have some influence in the state." So that was NYCGPA, New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association. We now rebranded as CANY. And he goes, "You got to join, you got to join." I said, "Nah, Dave, I don't want to talk to politicians. I don't want to be involved in Albany." Like, long story short, I joined. Thank God I did. We lobbied. We got a lot of good wins for small family farms and small hemp farmers like myself. And that morphed into, the THC conversation started coming up in the state. Cuomo legalized the end of March 2021. But then with all his scandals, he didn't do anything, right? So it left this giant loophole to where he legalized cannabis, but there was no framework. So you couldn't grow it, buy it, sell it. You could have it. But where did it come from? It didn't come from New York State. So that went on from the end of March all the way through. Hochul came in August of 21. And her thing was, "Hey, listen, I'm going to get, where Cuomo left off, I'm going to pick up. I'm going to get the Cannabis Control Board in. I'm going to get all the laws written. And I'm going to make this so we can get a viable industry out of this." So she picked that up, and she did great. I got to say, Hochul picked that up, and she appointed the people she needed to the Cannabis Control Board. And then we, CANY, and a few other organizations lobbied for basically the hemp growers who struggled because of all the confusion and misregulation and changes in laws. We should get first crack at legalized cannabis. Interesting. So you had to grow hemp for 2 years. You had to be in the program. You had to be compliant, right? Follow the rules. And if you did that for 2 years, then you could get the first person to get your license for rec. So that bill dropped in end of January, and in a month and a half, the law was passed. We had a framework. I applied, and by April 12th or 14th of 2022, I had my license in hand, which is, for New York State, for passing laws, is light speed. That's
trust me,
extremely fast. Nothing gets passed that quickly in New York State. So that's what ultimately got me into cannabis. So then once I started cannabis, the hops, I was like, I can't juggle all three. Hemp and cannabis are, I said, they're very similar. So the infrastructure is very similar. So that was easy, but to keep the hops just wasn't the right choice, wasn't economical. So we ended up getting rid of the hops and just sticking with hemp and THC.
It's super fascinating. So now I would love to hear a little bit about the products that you do. Before we get into the products, I want to hear about, again, the property. We have 13 acres. Are you growing on 13 acres?
So as the property, is nursery stock. Out here, we're on a sandy loam, most of Long Island sandy loam. There's some pockets of clay and stuff like that, but so not a lot.
I live by clay, and it's a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Not a lot of nutrition though in sandy loam, right?
Okay.
Drain's great, which plants love, but not a lot of nutrition. So as I said, I went to school for this. I'm a big into living soil, and just kind of providing what the earth, taking what the earth provides you, and incorporating that, right? So every year we bring in 15 tractor trailers of manure, another probably half a dozen or so tractor trailers of spent brewer's grain for Blue Point Brewery, and then shredded leaves. So we incorporate that in. And I do soil data analysis every year.
Wow.
So I've been able to take that soil from 1.5% organic matter up to over 5% organic matter, while at the same time using that soil. And then we also do cover crops. So we crop rotate. So that means we don't use the same plot every year. And then we'll cover crop it with either wildflowers or sorghum Sudan, which is a type of grass. So we'll do that rotation, and that's why we.
So how many acres are you using at a time?
At a time, we're using about 4 to 5, 4.5.
So every 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
that plot gets used again.
Yep.
That's really interesting. What's the benefit of that? Because it's just not nutritious, this soil?
So yeah, so if you grow the same crop, right, in the same spot, it's gonna strip those nutrients out of the ground.
Sure.
When you cover crop, you're putting nutrients back into the ground. And also that soil profile. So soil is alive. The mycorrhizal network is incredible. And mycorrhiza is something that goes onto the plant root and forms a symbiotic relationship. So the root gives the mycorrhiza sugar, and in turn, it makes more nutrients available to the root system. And it's really incredible. I highly recommend Kiss the Ground on Netflix. It's a great documentary that explains all into soil. But basically, when you have that living soil, as they call it, not only are there more nutrients available to the plant, you're actually also sequestering carbon. So for this is approximate, for every 1% organic matter per acre, you're sequestering 9 tons of carbon.
Wow.
And not only that, for every 1% of organic matter per acre, you're also storing 25,000 gallons of water.
Wow.
Per 1%. So you times that by 5 for me.
Yeah.
It's huge amounts of water. So when you have heavy 2 to 3 inch rains, if you have more organic matter, it's like a giant sponge. It's not going to run off and flood. The ground's going to absorb it, which in turn is going to recharge your aquifer. So it's all a giant loop, right? You're also taking more carbon out of the atmosphere.
Is that what's considered regenerative farming?
Yes.
Which has become a trendy term in the past in the year or two.
Very much so. We've been doing it here for 7 plus years.
That's how people used to farm. It's just
that's how everything was farmed. Yeah.
We just got so industrialized, and now we're going back to that stuff.
So we lost it because listen, after World War II, right? So pre-World War II, this is how everyone farmed. And one of the one of the reasons why this happened was, right, you had a huge spike in population in the world after World War II. The baby boomers, right? And then also the U.S. had to feed the world. The world was in shambles. We still are. Not as much as we were, but we saw the breadbasket for the world. So in order to do that, we had to increase crop yields. So we increased crop yields by using synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, and it was a necessity at the time. So you hear about victory gardens during the war and rations. That was because there literally wasn't enough food being grown. So yes, was a necessity. It was, but now that the rest, after that short period of time of let's say 5 to 7 years. The rest of the world came back online. Now it's just about profit. Yeah. And after a few years of conventional agriculture using those synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, that soil not only is going to get contaminated, right, and you're going to have residue on your food, but also that mycorrhizal network that I just explained about is dead. The soil is completely dead. You're actually going to lose topsoil. It's literally going to blow away. You're going to lose nutrition, and also even if the plant yields, relatively well, the density of nutrients in your food is significantly less. I mean, like 60 to 80% less nutrients in that same orange.
That's wild.
So it might look great, it might taste okay, but it's not. There's nothing. It's empty.
So, regenerative farming, hemp, and cannabis. Now, what kind of products are you doing? You talked about going into the DTC, direct to consumer market. Yeah. So talk to me about that. What kind of products do you have? What are you doing with the cannabis, and how does that work?
So with the hemp, we do flour, and that flour you can use it to smoke. You can use it to make tinctures, variety of things. So we sell flour. We also.
But you don't get high from hemp.
No, you don't.
So what would be the benefit of?
So if you smoke it, it relaxes you. You smoke CBD, very relaxing.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually great. Actually, so the cannabis that was smoked in the 70s, 80s, even to the early 90s. That was only like 5 to 10% THC. That was like 10 to 15% CBD. So it actually made your high better, mixing the CBD in with the THC, right? Yeah. So
I had an interesting conversation with the hemp farmer that I talked to. He's like, that classic cliche of like when your parents smoke, when your 50-year-old parents smoke the 20-year-olds marijuana now, they're like, oh my gosh, this isn't what it used to be. And he was like, no, it actually isn't what it used to be. Like, it's so much higher THC now. And so that's interesting.
Yes, it's anywhere between 5 to 7 times stronger than what it was. It's not. So when they keep bringing the THC higher, right, they lose all the minor cannabinoids. And those minor cannabinoids is what made your high so good. And that's why people are like, oh, I can't smoke, I get so anxious. That's because there's no minors. It's pure THC. It's like instead of having a beer, right, you're drinking 151 straight out of the bottle. Yeah. Same idea. And that's today's. But the reason why the market had to go that way is the stat was, don't quote me on this, but it was something like 80% of the cannabis market is consumed by 20% of the consumers. The other 80% of the products on the shelf is consumed only by by the top 20%.
Where does the rest of it go?
The other 20% is the other 80% of consumers.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, so that's why. So the people that smoke every day, right? Their tolerance gets higher and higher.
Oh, I see.
So they have to keep going stronger.
I see.
So they market it towards the people who smoke the most
every day.
Makes sense.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, but people who want to get into it, right, or someone who smoked back in the 70s and say, oh, I'll try it again. They're like, whoa, this is way too much for me. That's the reason why.
Huh.
So CBD. So the flower, variety of things, right? Then we have a soap that's really great. And then we have our number one selling product. We also do chapsticks as well, and vapes. But our number one selling product is our cream, our salve. So that is cocoa butter, shea butter base. It's 1,000 milligrams of CBD plus all your minors. And CBD is not only does it relax you, and it's anti-seizure, it's an incredible anti-inflammatory. And I highly recommend you look this up. All this information is readily available. So people love it for arthritis and aches and pains. And you rub it on twice a day, and especially senior citizens, they love it. It's a great product.
So now that's the hemp.
It's all hemp.
So now, what are you with the cannabis? What kind of product do you guys do?
So with the cannabis, we have a tier 3 processing. So for cannabis, we have our cultivation, processing, and distribution. So we grow everything here. So we have our outdoor, and then we have our greenhouse, which is a little higher quality, and we do pre-rolls with that. We sell flower for that as well. We're going to tier up our processing license eventually, but right now it's just flower products. That's all. And then we'll distribute that to your local dispensary, and that local dispensary
you can't sell it
to you. Yeah, no direct to consumer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
This is not my industry, so I don't know much about it.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I appreciate you explaining a lot about the hemp. Now, the benefits or the uses of cannabis are essentially just the high, or is there more to that?
No, I mean with THC, the high obviously is the number one, right? But also your appetite. A lot of cancer patients use it, during chemo because it keeps your appetite up.
That's with THC though. So
Yeah,
like
with THC.
CBD would not make you hungry then.
Yeah, no, CBD does not make you hungry. No. But it keeps up your appetite. Also, people say not only with the appetite, but it keeps you in a better, of course, you're high, so keeps you in a better headspace.
Sure.
And there's more and more research being done on. There is several benefits. As I said, not just for THC, but for all cannabinoids. And they haven't been able to really research that because, it's not. I mean, other than the minor cannabinoids, THC is still not federally legal. So a lot of people don't want to touch it, even colleges, right, or universities, because they'll lose federal funding for that university if they study it.
Oh, for even studying it then?
Yeah.
Oh,
so that's why.
Crazy,
yeah.
Man.
There was only one. So up until a year or two ago, there was only one university down south that could actually federally, legally study THC. They just released the Fed like 2 more licenses.
Wow.
Now I think there's 3. You'd have to Google that, but I think there's 3 universities now that can federally, like on a federal level, like they won't lose funding and they can study it. But we don't know. We still don't know.
Yeah. So I'm curious. That's so wild. So I'm curious now. DTC, like building the brand, direct to consumer.
Yep.
How did that work for you? How did it go? And how were you guys looking to grow that, or how did you grow it? Talk to me about that. Because branding is hard.
Branding is very difficult
when you start from zero to now. And also, I want to add in the fact that while it might have been difficult with a lot of regulations, when kind of they opened the floodgates, I felt like they were just kind of, and like so many people trying to go into this industry.
Yeah.
So I'm curious now how you stick out outside of that.
So with the hemp, we kind of just did local Long Island, and we just kind of hit boots on the ground, knocking door to door, very organic.
Really?
Yeah.
Actually knocking on people's doors.
Literally knocking on people's doors. Yeah.
Saying, hey, try our product.
Well, not their house, like businesses, right?
Oh, okay.
Retailers.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. And then, so we did a lot of that and just kind of grew it that way. With the THC, we started very small. Our brand's still very small, Route 27 for the THC. We're only in a few dispensaries, and we're just kind of proving ourselves with our quality and our backstory, and then kind of leaning on the hemp a little bit as a lot of people already know our brand. And that we're trying to get a good marketing plan together. Our bread and butter for our THC line is a third party comes in who has a brand already, and we do everything for them. So they do the marketing and advertising, and then we grow it, we process it, we distribute it, we do everything, we package it, soup to nuts. But they do all the branding.
So let me just make sure I understand that. So essentially, a third party comes in with using your product but their brand, essentially.
Exactly. So like,
almost like white labeling then.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah. So like, let's say they have product in 4 other states, right? It's not federally legal, so nothing can cross state lines. So each state's its own little microeconomy. Nothing can cross that state line. So
just like raw milk.
Yeah. Just like raw milk. Yes.
You're like the modern Amish, New York's Amish. Over
Yeah. So they'll be in New Jersey, they'll be in California, they'll be in Michigan. So we want to go into New York, and through the grapevine, they'll find out about us and say, hey, who's a good cultivator, who's got good cultivation skills, who's got good quality, who can do it. They'll say, oh, Route 27, why don't you go talk to Ryan?
So it's like a national brand using essentially micro agriculture.
Exactly.
That's wild.
So it's actually kind of cool that it's not federally legal, because it makes each state become its own little microeconomy, and all those dollars that are spent on cannabis in that state go back to that state, which is great. So if you had federal legalization, California would flood the entire market. I mean, all those dollars would go back to the state of California.
Is there tremendous taxation on you guys?
So that organization, CANY, and Farm Bureau as well, and a few other organizations, we lobbied really hard, because when they first rolled out the taxes, it was a potency tax. And that potency tax, depending on how much THC was in the product, was how much it got taxed. So the higher THC, the more tax. The lower THC, the less tax. And I believe no other state does that. Maybe one, but it's impossible, right? Because for several reasons, but the system does not work. So we lobbied to get it to a 9% distribution tax. So how it works in the state is, when we sell it to that dispensary, we sell a 9% distribution tax. And then when that dispensary sells it to the end consumer, there's another 13% tax.
Oh, wow.
Now that 9% distribution tax goes right to the state. That 13% tax is broken down. 9% of that goes to the state. 3% of that goes to the town.
Wow.
And 1% goes to the county.
Wow.
So there's a lot of tax revenue that stays local, which is great.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Lobbying is a term that a lot of people are familiar with, but I don't think they fully understand how it works. So you're being firsthand. Can you just give a brief explanation or example of what it means that you say, hey, we lobbied for this or that?
So basically, lobbying, so we lobbied on a state level, right? So we went up to Albany, and we went in, the House, the Senate, met with representatives from our districts, from Long Island, from upstate, and said, hey, this is, the reason why you need to change this law or amend or make a new law is because of X, Y, and Z. And this is how it's hurting, whether it be, the family farm, whether it be the end consumer, so on and so forth. And basically that senator, New York State Senator, New York State House of Representatives will say, well, why? And you explain it to them, you give them the facts, you show them why this needs to be changed, and then they make an educated decision on that.
So another term for lobby could essentially just be convincing.
Yeah.
With facts.
Yes.
So it's interesting, because I guess lobbying is not inherently bad.
It's bad when you have giant corporations who spend tens of millions of dollars to have, their whole job is to nag.
Well, that's the only
person.
Reference of lobbying I have. This is actually like a cool or a beneficial reference of lobbying. I would assume now that I understand the term a little better, that like something like DARE, like whatever it is, DARE, like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, whatever that is. Like, I'm sure they lobbied the state for things.
100%.
That's great lobbying. But it's interesting that word has terrible connotations because of the huge conglomerates.
Yeah. So those massive, pharmaceutical, oil, big ag, they're the ones, because they have, these massive budgets. It's not a grassroots thing. It's purely down to, this has to change so we can make another $100 million next year. We're lobbying for small family farms to keep the dollars in New York, to make, just common sense.
Well, you use real studies as opposed to fabricated studies.
Yeah.
But we're not getting into that. So I want to hear what you guys are looking to next. Like, so all the things you've explained that you guys have done and are doing, what are you looking to do?
So I have a few goals. One, educational, just to educate the public. That's always been a thing for me, and these common misconceptions and misnomers. Two is environmental impact, right? And just show people you can be environmentally friendly, and you can be regenerative, and you can still turn a great profit and still have a great margin, and do it without ruining the earth.
I want to actually just piggyback really quickly on that. All the things you are talking about essentially sound like organic farming, but now I know organic farming is a specific certification.
Yes.
Are you guys essentially organic practice without organic certification, or
exactly? So if you need to get a USDA organic certification, or NOFA certification, it is a tremendous amount of paperwork, like tremendous. And USDA, you need 5 years. The ground, there's a lot of bylaws.
Yeah, I heard it was 7 or something like that.
Yeah,
you just have to let it sit, right?
Yeah, I'll get there. I'm not there yet. I do all those practices with one of the organizations. As you made more money, they wanted more money, which that didn't make sense. Listen, if you're farming more acres, of course, the more acres you farm, the more you have to certify, right? But if I take 1 acre and certify that 1 acre, no matter how much money I make off that acre, I should be able to.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a Ponzi.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I was a little dissatisfied with them. And then even, one of the organizations that I spoke to, right? So here on the outdoor, we have a plastic mulch, right? So that goes down over the soil. So when you plant the plants in it, the weeds don't grow up because I don't use any herbicides here. So that plastic mulch is made with corn and soybean base. So it's completely biodegradable, no microplastics, biodegrades right into the ground. Wonderful. They came and they said, no, you can't. If you want to get certified, you can't use this. I said, why? I have data and studies on this, that it's not microplastics. It's not bad for the environment. Here's all the data. They said, well, we don't accept that in our program. I said, so then how am I supposed to put plastic mulch down to prevent weed growth? They said, regular plastic. I said, regular plastic? I said, that creates microplastics and leaches into the groundwater. I said, I'm not putting regular plastic in my ground. They said, that's what we do. I said, well, I'm not going to be a part of your organization. That's how it is. So that's another reason why I'm not.
One of the organic organizations.
Yes, one of the organic organizations.
They're probably lobbied.
Yeah. So those are just a few of the reasons. Even with the manure, right? They wanted, and I have certificate of analysis, so I have literally data on the manure I bring in, and they were like, well, you can't bring it in for a few years. I'm like, well, that's what regenerates the soil, which creates the microbiome.
That's crazy, man.
So there's all these very particular laws, and yeah.
Here you think you're buying an organic product, like even in the organic industry, it's all jab. Humans we screw everything up, man.
Yes.
It's so crazy.
It's wild. It's wild. So maybe one day I will be, but no. Yes, am I organic? Yes, but I can't claim myself to be organic because I'm not certified by these organizations. Maybe one day I will.
Yeah, I met a farmer's market. I was a farmer at a farmer's market out, I think, in Peconic. They're based. It was the same exact thing. They're like, we have all the practices we do. There was two vegetable farmers, and one was organic, one was not. And they pointed over it, and we said we do everything that they do. It's just we haven't gotten the certification because it's insane.
It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah.
The paperwork is unbelievable. I mean,
you have to track everything too, right?
Everything. Yeah. And there's not like a good. And if there is some softwares, but they're expensive. I mean, it's hard for a small operation of like 2 to 4 people. Like,
oh wow,
it's almost impossible.
That's wild that you're farming 4.
Oh no, not here. I'm saying for a small family farm. No, here we have a lot of employees. Yeah, we have a dozen employees.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that's crazy. That
But for the first, I'll be honest with you. For the first we've been here almost 10 years. First 7, 8 years, we only had 5. It was only 5 of us.
Good for you guys.
Yeah. No, we hustled.
Well, Ryan, it has been a pleasure. It's really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys do, and particularly in educating the public. Because again, like I said, this is not my industry. I've never smoked marijuana in my life. I don't know much about hemp because it hasn't been really accessible for a long time. This conversation for me has been really informative. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys do with the rest of the industry and informing the public. So Ryan, It was an absolute pleasure. Looking forward to seeing what happens next. So thank you so much for everybody for watching. Definitely go check out Ryan and all that he and his company are doing. So links will be in the description. We'll see you in the next video. And if you personally are interested in becoming a part of this podcast or know anybody specifically who would like to be a part of it, reach out. I'd love to talk with you. Have a great day. God bless. Peace out.